celebrating in a different way. So we want to hear your ideas, your opinions, your hopes and fears, so we can start a conversation. As with our other events, this isn't a debate. There are no sides, there are no right or wrong questions or answers. We're not here to talk about council tax or bin collections, important as those things are. Our focus tonight is on the new normal. So I'd like to introduce Councillor Jeff Brown.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event. I'm Jeff Brown. I'm Cornwall Councillor for Newquay Central, but portfolio holder for transport. Today's event is about acknowledging some of the changes that we've all had to make since the beginning of lockdown, exploring some of the more positive things that have come out of it, and how we make sure we learn from our experiences as we move forward. I know that life has been very hard for most of us, but I also know that many of you have reported that you enjoyed having more time at home with your family, as well as having more time to volunteer. And I'd like to pay tribute to all those who have given such valuable time to help others. It's very true what they say, Cornwall perhaps the poorest county, but with the biggest heart. A lot of this was made possible through the increase in home working, which has had a big effect on the way we plan our daily lives. We'll be hearing from some of Cornwall's leading businesses and employers today on how this has affected their businesses and their staff, as well as representatives from our voluntary community, reflecting on how communities have come together in this crisis. Before coronavirus became such a big part of our lives, we, as Cornwall Council, have been looking at ways to make it easier for people to make choices about how they travel, and choosing more sustainable methods of transport where possible, which not only helps the environment, but is actually good for our health too. This is why we've invested considerably in shared use routes across Cornwall in recent years, from schemes which make it easier and safer for students to walk or to cycle to school, as well as for people to walk and cycle to work in Redruth, Truro, Bodmin, and to routes such as the National Cycle Network, where we have the Bay to Bay route, Hale to Marazion. We're currently working to create a 30-kilometre network of multi-use trails linking Newquay, Perranporth, St Agnes, St Newlyn East and Truro, which will provide opportunities for residents and visitors alike. And in addition, we're also looking at potential routes in North and South East Cornwall. I very much look forward to hearing what you all have to say today and what we can all learn from each other to make Cornwall what we want for the future, and look forward to it immensely.
Lovely. So let's go to our first video of the evening, where we'll hear from Vaughan Temby from Disability Cornwall, who talks about how we can take this opportunity to better support disabled people in our communities.
There's got to be some bonuses from everything that everybody has been through because of this pandemic, and I think it's been widely publicised that one of those very few bonuses is how local communities have come together to try and support each other as best as they possibly can. Our charity came together with a local sports facility, which was Hale Rugby Club, and a private business, the Cornish Oven. And collectively, we set up the Hale Community Kitchen. And at its peak, we were supporting around 500 households. And we were delivering food thanks to our team of community hero volunteer drivers. And so our volunteer drivers were actually like little mobile food banks out on the road. By the end, we had delivered over 11,000 pasties, hot meals and tubs of soup. When I was actually doing a consultation with one of our members, and I said, how difficult has it been for you now that we're in this lockdown situation? And she was like, well, nothing's changed really. Weren't able to access mainstream society that much before anyway, so being locked in at home is not vastly different for us. You think, that ain't good. And how can we improve that going forward? I think there's a lot of work to do. So how can we ensure now as we go forward, let's think about the high street, for example. There's a lot of talk at the minute about the pedestrianisation of high streets, thinking of social distancing. And that could be really good, but it can't be at the behest of disabled access. This is our opportunity to improve that.
Okay, so a question for our panel. How do we continue to harness the goodwill of individuals we've seen so much of since lockdown, and also make sure that our society is built around people's uniqueness, recognising that we're all different and have different needs? Who would like to jump in first? Edward, let's go to you.
Yeah, I think the key thing you said there was everyone's different and recognising everyone's different needs. And I think the trouble is sometimes we put in county-wide solutions, which won't necessarily work. We need local solutions that are tailored to local needs. And what works in one area won't work in another area. So it's having that flexibility, and centralised things like councils aren't very good at flexibility. And nor's national government either. So we've got to find a mechanism whereby different people can do different things.
And Toby, I think you wanted to jump in. Just a reminder to everyone this evening, if you could introduce yourselves before you start speaking, that would be fab. Yes, let's go to, who was next? Toby, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm Toby Parkins. I'm the president of Cornwall Chamber of Commerce, also director of Head Forwards, a local software company based in Poole. In terms of harnessing and supporting people who are volunteering, I mean, obviously during COVID, we've had a fantastic, we've seen lots of great community support, people looking after one another. I think from the business's perspective, I think, and employers' perspective, I think there's a great opportunity for employers to try and encourage members of staff to volunteer, and recognizing that volunteering is it's a great way of supporting communities. It's also actually really good for one's own personal mental health, and it's certainly something that I've found with lots of members of staff in the past. When we've encouraged people to take up volunteering, then they have felt really good about themselves. There's something about giving and helping other people that actually helps yourself. So that's something that I think should be encouraged by all employers, both businesses and other organisations.
And Catherine, I think you were next.
Hi everyone, I'm Catherine Nissen. I'm Chief Executive of Cornwall Rural Community Charity, and I'm here today hopefully representing lots of partners that we've been collaborating with across Cornwall, but particularly during the COVID response. So as some people might know, we formed a voluntary emergency response alliance at the beginning of lockdown, and it was made up of 16 chief executives from the charitable sector. And what we have done is started meeting daily, and we've reduced now to once a week, where we are listening to the voices of people in our communities, because we're ideally placed to gather that information. So what we've been able to do by working together is we've been able to really recognise where that need is and respond to that need. So like with the food project that was set up by Disability Cornwall. So one of the things that we have been able to do is to harness that local knowledge and try and put that in one repository in one place. So we actually have the Cornwall Link website, which some people might be aware of, where you can go on as a resident in Cornwall and you can type in your postcode in your area, and you can find out what's available in your area to help you out if you're needing support, or even if you are a volunteer and you're wanting to get involved and to provide some information and support. There's also a helpline, and we run this with AGK and Disability Cornwall as part of our Inclusion Matters project. So what we've been finding is trying to respond to the need that's there, and through the conversations that we're having on the ground, because I think, we probably all thought what is needed, but actually I think it was Edward who'd said earlier on, it's about knowing what's specific to that area, because what might be needed in West Cornwall could be very different to what's needed in Bude or East Cornwall. So I think that's really important. In terms of harnessing that, I think we've got a really slim opportunity to do that at the moment. And in terms of time, I think it's what Toby said about, the payback and the benefits that people get from volunteering. But also, I think realising as someone yourself what it feels like to suddenly have this newfound sense of community. You know, I live in a street of 5 houses, and we've suddenly become much more involved in each other's lives, celebrating birthdays, helping out, and actually what that brings to our own well-being. So I think it's about harnessing that and really paying attention to the things that have been really beneficial to people during lockdown, particularly if we're then thinking, you know, we don't know what's going to happen with local lockdowns in case we get this back into a similar position. So I think it's about continuing those conversations, finding out where that need is and working how we can best meet that need.
And Claire, can we go to you next, please?
Hello everyone, I'm Claire Aramar and I am the Youth Work Manager for CRCC. And what I think we need to hang on to is the newfound ability to not work in silos, and that has been really come to the fore in COVID. All those hideous red tapes that we bound ourselves up in, we have been able to free ourselves of that. I know some, you know, I know rules and regulations are important in their, you know, but some of them get in the way, I think. And I think for me, what I have noticed from all the people I work with is we've all kind of come together and stopped being so territorial and got on with the job in hand. So I'd like to see that continue.
And Matthew, let's go to you next.
Hi, and my name is Matthew. I represent the Truro cycling campaign and the Truro Loops project. Just to echo what Edward was talking about this whole idea about one size fits all, and you know, Cornwall has been a very car-centric county just because of the geography of it. Now, obviously, what COVID and post-lockdown has shown us is that our communities can survive without cars. You know, people can not only shop locally, they can exercise locally. And one of the greatest things that we saw down in Truro was people actually getting back out onto the roads and being safe. So that's not just from a cyclist point of view, that's from a pedestrian point of view, and for all abilities and all ages. You know, it was encouraging to see families cycling to the parks in Truro across, you know, a very busy dual carriageway, which would not happen in previous times. Now, as far as harnessing that is concerned, I think people have been shown a snapshot of what could be possible if we were all to put our mind together. And I think as Cornwall Council has a really great opportunity to harness the energy that COVID has brought along, and to basically embrace the change, you know, get people out of cars, look at sustainable transport systems, get people onto, I mean, I appreciate there's issues with public transport and social distancing, but in the long term, it's becoming a far less car-centric society and a more community-based society. I think it will help us all.
And Jeff, do you want to jump in next?
Thank you. Yeah, Jeff Brown, I'm Cabinet Member for Transport. I've spent 50 years in a wide range of coast rescue volunteer roles, and I think that people tend to gravitate to an area that interests them. So it's always good that if we can give them regular training and briefings to help them to give their very, very best, but also to make sure that they become part of a team, because I think it's all about working with other colleagues to become part of a really effective team. And for me, what was most rewarding was a successful outcome. Whatever I was doing, if the result was success, that was reward enough. But I think we should never forget that thank you costs very little, but means an awful lot.
So we're going to take a couple of questions and a couple of points from Facebook. So this is from Martin Mania. He says, the Cornwall We Want is one where children, the elderly and vulnerable can receive the help they need, and the people who provide the care and services are treated and paid a proper wage. What do people think about that? Catherine, let's go to you.
Hi, I would like just to comment on the first one. I think that what I've seen in the last few months is a real shift in how everyone's working together. that wasn't there before, a little bit like Claire said earlier on. But in terms of, I've now been involved with meetings with the NHS, with the council, across the charity sector, where conversations are much more joined up, and we're looking at how we work together and best plug the gaps where there are gaps. So I'm really hopeful that we're working more towards that way of working, so that we have got a better way of supporting everyone in our society, from young people up to the elderly. I think that we've got a responsibility to do that as part of the Cornwall We Want. And I think that message has been incredibly clear. I was at a meeting last week. There were 120 of us with the NHS, led by Kate Shields from RCHT, and that was very much the message that was coming out. I personally do agree with the being paid appropriately, but obviously I don't have any say in that or influence over that. But yeah, they're my thoughts on that one.
And Meredith, can we go to you next, please?
Yeah, Meredith Teasdale from Cornwall Council. So I think COVID-19 has really allowed us to focus on areas of our communities that we haven't done as well, perhaps in the past, whether that be young people. And for me, I'm absolutely passionate about how we improve outcomes for children and young people, but also people with disability, and also elderly. And also it's refocused us to really think about the strengths within that, the staff who are supporting communities and families and individuals and vulnerable people. And I absolutely think that we need to be making sure that there is the right pay for people in that, for in that employ. And certainly that's something that Cornwall Council looks to do.
And Andrew, did you want to jump in?
Yes, good evening. Thank you, Sarah. My name's Andrew Mitchell. I'm Cabinet Member for Homes. I represent St Ives West on Cornwall Council. So I think Cornwall's response in general over the COVID thus far has been absolutely fantastic. It has brought people, groups and communities together. I think any society can only judge itself really on how we look after the most vulnerable in our society. And what has been brought to the fore and is within the question is also how we treat those people who look after those vulnerable people. And I'm one probably of many people watching and listening tonight that were really disappointed after what's happened, promises made or certainly implied, people going out and clapping, including our Prime Minister and Cabinet, and then reverting to, well, no, you nurses did a pay deal with us 2 years ago and we're not going to give you anything else. I think was something that those carers, those nurses and the people in general didn't expect to be the response. So some priorities obviously for most people would appear to be different to the government. Cornwall Council, we actually have invested an extra £10 million to make sure that we pay carers the Living Foundation minimum wage, which is around £1 more than the government's minimum wage. So that's how we're actually enacting our policies and our statements here in Cornwall. Thank you.
So I'm going to take another question from Facebook, and this is from Andrew Richards. He says, what can Cornwall do to combat the obesity epidemic in both adults and children? Andrew, I can see your hand is raised there. Do you want to jump in?
I think it was left up, but I have to say, anybody who knows me and the shape and size of me, I'd certainly like to know the answer to that question. Certainly, I think my description medically is clinically morbidly obese, and just saying, oh, well, go out and do more exercise, eat less. To be perfectly blunt, I'm an example of how that doesn't work. I have taken the opportunity, as I think Matthew mentioned earlier, the less traffic on the roads. The council has purchased a number of electric bikes, and I'm trialing one of those, and I found it really helpful to be able to get out. Yes, it does make all the hills around St Ives seem a lot flatter, But I also feel myself that I know I have put some effort into it, even though it is electric bike. And we won't talk about the 2 times I fell off.
Matthew, do you want to go next?
Yeah, hi, I'm Matthew from Truro Cycling Campaign. Yeah, it's just to sort of echo a little bit with what Andrew was saying, but you know, we do have an obesity crisis in this country, and you know, the no-brainer in this is walking and cycling. It's people getting out of their cars. It's people actually, our children cycling to the beaches. You know, it's having adequate, safe cycle ways that people can, for instance, from Truro, from Camborne, from Redruth, families should be able to cycle out to the coast. They should be able to cycle out onto the moorland. They should be able to cycle out in the countryside without having to put the cars on put the bikes on the back of the car. I think mental health comes into this in a big part. A big part of children's issues at the moment, especially in the current climate, is children need to be able to feel that they can go out and be in safe environments. I live in the centre of Truro. There's a big skateboard park literally just down the road from me, but children, you know, from a very young age will not go in there, mainly because of the roads around there. So if there were safe passages throughout the cities, throughout the countryside, then people will be encouraged to do a lot more active travel, and that would then, you know, relay itself back into people's not only physical health but their mental health.
And Edward, your hand is raised. Do you want to say something?
Yes, Edward Chapman from the Federation of Small Businesses, but it's my own personal passion is health and fitness. I've got a business around health and fitness. And one of the really important parts, yes, exercise is important, but the calories you put in are much more important than exercise. And unfortunately, most people eat food that's calorie dense but not very nutritious, and most of the offers you see in supermarkets are on food that you'd eat more of if you bought 2 of them. You don't very often see buy one get one free on a Cornish cauliflower, which is an excellent food. So I think we need a lot more control around supermarket advertising, fast food advertising, much more education in schools around nutrition. I volunteer with a children's charity. Most of the children there don't know that peas come in a pod, so they don't know about food. So if we educate more around food, the calories you put in have a really big impact. So I'd like to see much more food education in schools, much more control on food advertising, food special offers. And yes, exercise helps because then you feel good about yourself. So hopefully we'll see that coming through gradually, more people exercising, more people going to the beach. And I don't know if people heard the programme on Radio 4 yesterday about Camborne. Most children in Camborne haven't been to the beach, which is quite staggering because we're not getting out enough. We don't feel confident about cycling down to the beach, as someone said. So we need much more access to the countryside, getting out and about without being run over.
And Claire, do you want to jump in?
Yes, hello, Claire from CRCC. So in a previous life, I was the neighbourhood manager for the most deprived areas in Cornwall, and that included Camborne. And one of the issues is that we don't teach our young children to swim, and we live in a county that's surrounded by water, yet we don't prioritise swimming lessons as a, you know, they get a term of it or whatever, but they don't get to swim from a young age to be confident in the water. And that is why families don't take their children, because if you've got 5 children and they don't swim, then being down the beach all day is not much fun. It's a bit of a chore, actually. And it's never ceased to amaze me the lack of importance Cornwall puts in teaching its children to swim, considering its geography.
Thanks, Claire. Right, we're now moving on to our second section of the evening. So our second video, and this time it's from our panellist Stafford Sumner on home working and benefits to businesses in Cornwall.
Hi there, my name's Stafford Sumner from Jurang. I'm the Managing Director of a marketing agency with an office based in Falmouth. One of the fantastic benefits we found over lockdown has been the cultural move to video calling and video meetings that we sometimes felt resistance from our clients outside of the county who wanted to see us face to face. It's been a revelation to us and to our clients that we can now have a 90-minute meeting via video instead of previously us taking a whole day out of the office to drive further up the line to have the meeting, to drive back again. Lots of wasted time, bigger carbon footprints, and relatively unproductive in terms of that dead time of travel. So we're all finding it as a business that we've got a lot more spare time to look at our own infrastructure projects, to look at our own business development, working on our own business. I think we're not going to see a return to the way in which we used to work here at Jurang. I think we're going to see face-to-face meetings perhaps become quarterly rather than monthly. I think we're going to use video conferencing far more than we ever have done previously. We've built in morning huddles via video call, which keeps the team connected. We do a weekly quiz. And when we do go back to office working, I'd like to see the cultural side of things return, where maybe the whole team are in a couple of days a week. But if it gives the team the flexibility to do more with their friends and family, after work, but immediately as they finish, then that's great. We get a happy and motivated team.
Okay, so some interesting points raised by Stafford there. So working from home and online meetings can obviously have huge benefits to business, but it's a big culture change. So how do businesses support staff to work differently? And what can we do to support local businesses that rely on office-based custom? Edward, can we go to you first?
Yeah, this time I'm speaking as a representative of the Federation of Small Businesses. It's been a massive advantage for small businesses because they haven't had travel costs. They've been able to transact business with people out of county, for example. If they're trainers, they can train people in Scotland, overseas, whatever. So I just hope we continue doing this and that bigger companies will allow smaller businesses to engage with them in that way. But one of the downsides is you haven't necessarily got all the safeguards around working at home. So, for example, if you're sitting on your sofa with your laptop, you've got poor posture. Whereas in the office, of course, you've got all the right chairs, the right equipment. And then also there is the problem around, well, have you got fire safety at home? So we need to think about those issues as well, that people being at home more, have they got smoke detectors, all that sort of thing. So a real big chance for small businesses to cut their overheads, people to spend less on travel, more time with their family. But we need to think around those difficult things like use of good equipment, insurance, safety, and those sort of things, and not go back to the old way of having to be in an office. So yeah, I think it's a really good chance for businesses to thrive.
And Toby, what are your thoughts about that?
I think it's important for businesses to get the balance right with this. There are lots of advantages for people working from home. Obviously, there's sustainability advantages. Reducing travel is good for the planet. But there are also some disadvantages, and I think generally speaking, experienced people find it easier to work from home because they're used to the work that they're doing. They know what they're doing. Generally speaking, experienced people sometimes live in larger houses. They've got more space than less experienced people. Certainly people when they're starting careers, generally, they don't have such a large house. They've got less space. They might just, rent a bedroom. And actually, culturally, I think people when they're starting their careers perhaps need a lot more cultural support, which is provided in the workplace. So I think it's very important for people that are making decisions on this to ensure that we do get the balance right between, encouraging more working from home, whilst also ensuring that people are supported. One of the key things, the key differences between working from home and working in an office that people always comment about is the trust issue. And actually trusting people to work from home means that you're more likely to focus around the activities that are being carried out, as opposed to the actual amount of time and the minutes and hours that somebody spends sat at a desk or in a workplace. And if businesses start focusing more on activity and productivity based measurement of staff, then actually that means that they potentially could become a lot more productive. Just measuring the amount of hours and minutes that people sit in an office is not the best way of achieving better productivity. And we all know that the productivity challenge that the UK and in particular Cornwall has within its businesses is a real challenge, and something that we should be trying to focus on addressing.
And Jeff, can we go to you next, please?
Yes, thank you. What's been quite interesting is that before COVID-19, there was an estimated 15% of people in the workforce in the Southwest working from home. That's compared with a national average of about 10%. So the Southwest is already a very popular place for home working. But during COVID-19, it's estimated that the home working workforce was about 20 million, which is huge. And we did some calculations based on councillors and officers at Cornwall Council. The estimate is that we're saving by working from home about 47,000 miles a day in travel, which is staggering. And it's got to be good for the planet from that respect. But in terms of the people who are actually doing the work, there's a couple of issues. One is making sure that people get suitable breaks, because my own experience, we seem to work back to back on meetings, and you're not really aware of what other people are doing. So they're working from home. They need to be they need to time manage and have those suitable breaks. It might be that a better way forward would be to balance the week, so that perhaps you did a couple of days in an office and 2 or 3 days working from home, so that you still maintain that team building element, which if you all work from home is really difficult to do.
And Stafford, do you want to add something there?
Yeah, I think there's some Stafford Sumner from Jurang here who saw me in the video. Just to add a couple of points to the clip there. One thing we've adopted is the work from anywhere policy. So this has been brought on by COVID, something we'd put off for probably several years, harking back to Toby's point there about trust. So I think what we need to do is get the infrastructure right first and get the parameters right in terms of how we manage our teams. Obviously, this has been fast-tracked. So, we allow the choice of our team members, whether they work from home or they work from the office or they work from wherever they are. It really doesn't matter to us. They've got that choice and they can book their desk, they can go in. So if they want that social interaction, that water cooler conversation, they can get it. Or if they want to work from home because it's more convenient for them, or they want to get their heads down and really get through some work, they can do that. I think the second point being that we're not doing it to save costs. This is a cost-saving exercise. We've actually seen productivity has gone up because people now have that flexibility. And I totally take on board the points about the mental health and the mental awareness about having breaks. I think I'd finish with just saying the way in which we're managing our team now is we look at it in a bit of a productivity sandwich. We look at it, you have to be really clear about what you want them to achieve. And this works for our business. It won't work for every business, but you have to be really clear about what you want them to achieve. They're very tight parameters. You then have to give them the flexibility and the freedom to go and deliver that. And that's that trust element that Toby mentioned. And then you have to be really tight on the way you measure that. So when they come back and they finish the job or whatever it is, you need to be really clear on accountability. So it's a very, very simple model. And we found that the engagement from our team has gone up significantly. Happiness has gone up significantly. Productivity has gone up. And that's aside from all of the other environmental issues that we mentioned. And what I have just found out today, is that, I've got team members who are messaging each other, checking to see when they're going to be in the office, or perhaps I'll work from the office on Thursday. We can catch up, we can have lunch. I think people are recognising that themselves. So yes, there's absolutely, the company needs to be able to support that. but it's also important the company listens to the employees' ideas about how they can manage their time as best as possible.
And Sally Wright has raised an interesting point on Facebook. She said, I love saving on transport, but what about domestic energy consumption during the winter? Isn't that a big problem for the climate? What do people think about that one? Toby, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, it's one of the things. I mean, we're at work. We're looking at, aiming to become carbon neutral and carbon positive. But in terms of our footprint, one of the biggest challenges you actually have, obviously, is people driving to work. I think it is important to remember in 10 years' time, when you can't buy a petrol or diesel car anymore, then the actual carbon footprint side of that impact will have shifted, and actually offices and buildings where you've got everybody in one place actually then potentially become more efficient and have a lower carbon footprint than lots of individuals heating their houses. So I mean, that is a fair point, which I think needs to be balanced. And of course, actually, if we're encouraging people to cycle to work more, and certainly, I'd recommend people trying out electric bikes, because all of a sudden you can cycle to work without working up a sweat. And when we have more cycleways, then it becomes safer, and all of a sudden you're going to massively reduce the carbon footprint of travel and actually benefit from more efficient heating within when people are working from offices. So it's not as simple as just as thinking that cutting out travel and cutting out offices will reduce carbon footprint. It potentially may not.
And another question from Facebook. So this is from John Lakey. He says, working from home is great for older and more experienced people, but what about young people and apprentices? Catherine, do you want to jump in?
Thank you. Yes, Catherine Neston, CEO of Cornwall Rural Community Charity. I think this is down to management styles. And I think that as senior leaders, we've all got a responsibility to be looking after our teams, a little bit like Stafford said earlier on. We've got a team of 100 at Cornwall Rural Community Charity. So it's been quite a challenge to manage working from home and what that looks like, although we do have teams that do that on a regular basis. And actually, what's been really important has been communication. It has been those things like touching base with people. We've been doing surveys, we've been having coffee mornings about how people like to work. It is that flexibility, and it's the responsibility of the managers to check in with people a lot more than perhaps was happening previously. As is very clear now, we've all got an insight into each other's houses, apart from me, who sits in front of a blue curtain, so I look like I'm in a photo booth. But you do get to know different elements of people's lives, and I think it's our responsibility to get to know our staff, check in with them, see if something's not right, to try and see what we can do to support them. And I think that's ever more important, especially as we're taking on new people, younger people who perhaps are having their first job. We've got some like that at the moment, and you're trying to think of the best ways to support them. So it is about that communication, that flexibility, and those continued conversations. And I think the ability to bend and flex ourselves as leaders. I remember having a conversation in early March with our IT team saying, right, overnight we might need to go into lockdown. And I don't think they believed me, but suddenly we were. And we were having to do that. And the only way that we've all survived and got through this and continue to work successfully at home is through that conversation, that communication, and listening to each other rather than imposing. And the feedback that I get from across our organisation is that's really worked. Interesting to pick up on something from earlier on about productivity. I think there's also an element of presenteeism. I've been reading about this recently. This is something I struggle with. I sit down at 7:30 and I'm still here at 7:45, and sometimes I might, go and have a comfort break and lunch and things, but then you're not working at home, you're living with your work in your home, and that's very, very different to working from home. So we do have to make sure that we're checking in on the mental well-being and the health of everyone that we're working with, particularly people that are new to our organisations or this way of working. Because yes, we might be older and more experienced, but we've got a duty of care for those that are also in our organisation.
And Claire, do you want to go next?
Yeah, so working with young people my entire working life, I think this way of working, this whole world we find ourselves in, they storm this. They absolutely storm this. This is the world that young people understand. They spend their lives talking to each other over online. This is the world they live in. So I actually think for them, this has probably been a whole lot easier than it has been for people my age. I think they can take this sort of communication in their stride because it is part of their everyday life.
And Matthew, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, as Matthew from Truro Cycling Campaign, I was just going to echo exactly what Claire said. I think we do our younger generation a disservice by saying that they're not ready for this. I think in the experience that I've had in the short term that we've had from working from home, it was those people that were more experienced and had been used to sort of working in the sort of the 9-to-5 office scenario that have found it hardest to adjust. I think our young generation are used to this way of working, and I think they will embrace it. I think that is the future, and I think the knock-on effect of that, it'll be less emphasis on things like commuting to the office. The whole idea of the office culture could well be a thing of the past.
And one more quick point on home working, and Nicola Griffin has said we need to ensure good internet access. How big a problem is that when we're thinking about working from home? Catherine, let's go to you, please.
Thank you. It's a massive problem, and it's one that's it's reflected throughout the country. As a rural community charity, we're one of 38 of a network around the country, and I'm actually involved in conversations at the moment where we're looking at internet access and connectivity, because when we're in lockdown, either working from home or home educating, it's really, really important that we've got that internet access, and that's something that we really suffer with here. And it's very difficult for people to access in terms of, do they have access to broadband, but also in terms of equipment or access to equipment or the skills to be able to do that. So one of the things that we're doing at CRCC is looking at how we can be part of providing that digital access. From things like, we have a helpline available for anyone to phone up if they're not able to get online and want some support and help with doing that. I know that Age UK have been looking at providing different equipment to people that perhaps don't have access to equipment, because not only is that digital connectivity an issue in terms of us running our lives, but it's also hugely important in terms of connectivity for isolation and loneliness. And that's something that has been so apparent, I think, for most of us in how we conduct our lives now. We have Zoom calls, we have FaceTime, we have all of these things, and you need to have the skills but also the connectivity for that. So, I'm hopeful that in the next few months, because we're lobbying government at the moment, that we may be having some more information that we can feed out on that in terms of how we can improve that connectivity.
And Toby, what are your thoughts about that?
Very quickly, I think, we're getting close to sort of 90-something%, 95 to 98% of properties will have good fibre broadband, which means that 2% won't. That's still an awful lot of houses that will not actually have fast enough connections to allow people to work effectively from home. And that the only way to solve that really is through additional grants. I mean, there are some collective community grant schemes at the moment for areas that have got less than 10 megabit per second, but it's a huge challenge. I think the other challenge is that there are some households that can't afford a fixed line plus a broadband connection, and so essentially there's a whole raft of households that can technically get the broadband, but their household does not doesn't have the wherewithal to subscribe to that, and therefore anybody living in that household is immediately disadvantaged.
And Edward, let's go to you quickly before we move on to our next topic.
Yeah, Edward from the Federation of Small Businesses again. Just 2 points really. Since I've been Zooming all over the world, I've realised how bad this country is compared with other countries. We think we're good, we're not good. And the other problem is a lot of houses are old, and if you've got Wi-Fi, it will work in one room, but not another room. So if you're trying to sort of be private because both of you are working in the house, you both need to be private. One of you has the internet, one of you doesn't have the internet. So I think there's lots of problems to solve. And I think we're trying to solve it in the old way of thinking rather than thinking, well, perhaps we can use the Internet of Things, perhaps we can use different types of networks. So we need to think quite inventively about how to solve the problem.
Thank you. So moving on to our final video of the evening, and we'll hear from the Truro Cycling Campaign and their vision for safer cycling in Truro.
Hi, I'm Sarah Weatherall from Truro Cycling Campaign. We set up about 3 years ago to promote and campaign for safe cycle routes in and around Truro. We have a vision for Truro. We want it to be a people-centred place where people can safely cycle to do most of their everyday trips, whether that's going to school, whether that's going to college, to work. We've seen through the lockdown how much latent demand there is for cycling. People out cycling on near traffic-free roads, confident to do so. We want to return to that.
Hi, my name is Fred Mitchell from Clyde Mitchell Cycles in Truro. We're just in our 50th year of business in Truro. We've just had our 6th busiest month on record. We've seen sales of e-bikes go up, which is 50% of our trade now, of our business. Yeah, and the main thing is really safety. Is people want to be safe and they want to be secure and happy. Certainly in the lockdown, when we've seen people, we've seen families riding through the middle of Truro, literally.
During the lockdown, we loved the tranquility, the peace, and the open roads, and it felt very much safer and more enjoyable to use the bicycles. And we went cycling a lot more, used our bikes more, and it felt like a fun thing to do. And yeah, it was healthy, in touch with nature and outdoors, and it was really good for mental health as well during that time when.
We saw through lockdown how easy it is to cycle when there's less traffic around. People confident to do so on traffic-free roads. So we want to return to that. We want to see more people out cycling. So this is an example of an issue that we would like to see sorted here in Truro. I'm standing at the bottom of 40 steps which lead to the footbridge over the railway station at Truro. Not far from me is the Coostbean cycle path, which is a safe off-road cycle route that joins Truro with many of the key residential and employment areas, 3 Milestone, Travis, Truro College. So when you come along that cycle path, you are encouraged through signage to come up to the railway station if you want to carry on your journey by train. And as you can see, you then have to carry your bike up these steps. In terms of the bigger picture, we're keen for Cornwall Council to make use of the latest government guidance, which really does up the standards for cycling infrastructure. It talks, for example, about taking space from cars on the highway where there's enough space and it's feasible to do so. A good example of this in Truro would be the A390 corridor from the Langgarth Park and Ride into Truro. Plenty of space there to make a segregated cycling path. People could come in from on the park and ride, leave their car there, hire an e-bike, cycle into Truro. So we implore Cornwall Council to be bold, continue to be bold in their vision, and to make cycling the transport of first choice.
Okay, so as we know, Cornwall is a very rural community, and for us to be able to rely less on cars, we need to have safer travel alternatives. So how do we move from our car-based culture to sustainable, greener travel? Let's go to Richard first, please.
Good evening, Richard Pascoe, team principal at St Piran. It's really simple. If you want to carry one thing away from this meeting tonight, is a tin of red paint. If we had 1.5 metres of red paint on the side of the road, it would let car drivers know there is a safe or area to keep cyclists safe and for cars to stay out. And I'm not an advocate of getting rid of cars. I'm a car driver. I want to drive my car. But all of a sudden, if you have a tin of red paint and have that 1.5 metre section on your road with red chippings, Cornwall could be the first county in the country that could bring this in. It's a political will. You just put it down. Doesn't matter how wide the road is, how narrow the road is. The car will know not to go in there. The cyclist equally will know not to go out into the road. If a foreign country can do it, Amsterdam, Copenhagen, we can do it. Red paint. And what that suddenly does, everybody knows the benefits, for example, of cycling or whatever, but let's go broader. It's about social prescription. Social prescription is going to affect all of us. Health matters, mental health matters. It's going to come into all of our lives, and cycling is just merely a tool to help people unlock themselves. And then on social prescription, and I'm an employer as well, it's all about the time and the cost, and we can share some of the times and costs, for our employees or the employers to give some form of social prescription for either exercise or volunteering. Job done. So tonight I would say red paint, political will, and we can change this county.
And Matthew, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, hi Matt from Truro Cycling Campaign. Now, obviously, what the video outlined was there is a real will out there for cycling, but the infrastructure within Cornwall just is not set up for it. And over the years, there has been lip service almost has been paid to it by literally getting the white paint out and just painting a cycle lane on a pavement or on a road or on a bus lane, and we've created potential real nightmare hotspots. If you come out of the Truro Park and Ride, it tells you to go onto the cycle. It tells you to cycle on the bus lane. Now you cycle halfway down that bus lane, the bus lane disappears, and you are thrown into the chaos of a dual carriageway. Now that is and that's a simple example of the lack of foresight. There is no joined up thinking. There's lots of little things that have happened in Cornwall. There's everything to do with the Saints Trails is going ahead, and that's fantastic. And linking St Agnes at the moment, it's linking St Agnes to 3 Milestone and the Park and Ride, and it's how you get these infrastructures to join up. So part of the Truro Loops project is to look at some of these areas, like how do you link Truro train station to the city centre by cycling? You cannot put electric bikes at Truro train station because people would have to cycle down Richmond Hill. And as anyone who's ever cycled down that hill, it's a traffic nightmare, and you would not wish it on your worst enemy. So the infrastructure has to be from the bottom up. It has to be from the basics. So we have to look at safety, and we have to look at encouraging children, elderly, not just people that are cycle for a hobby, but it's for people to cycle to school, for people to cycle to work, to cycle to see family, to cycle to the shops. We've talked before about there being a change in working from home. Maybe that second car could disappear. Maybe an electric bike or could come into a family setup. It's all about thinking from the bottom up, but it's all very well dishing out electric bikes and promoting that, but we do need to have the infrastructure on our basic roads, and the red paint will work. A bit of white paint might work, but at the end of the day, it's actual bold forward thinking that will get us through this.
Edward, can I go to you next, please?
Yeah, Edward from the Federation of Small Businesses again. Sarah made the point it's very difficult to make your whole journey on a bicycle, but we do have the infrastructure. They're called roads. Now, I don't cycle in Cornwall because I don't feel safe, but I do cycle in Spain, because in Spain, if a motorist knocks a cyclist over, it's presumed the motorist is at fault. So he takes a lot of care not to knock a cyclist over. We need to change our roads so they're acceptable for motorists and cyclists. Then we don't need to have specialist cycle paths built. We can use roads for cycles and cars. So I think it's really up to the motorist to change their attitude. And I'm a motorist as well, so that we can both use the facilities. And I think that idea of painting a great big red stripe on the road so you know how much space to give a cyclist, good idea. I think we need to change the law so that if there is an accident, it's presumed that the motorist was at fault until it's proved otherwise. So that then motorists will then take more care, because you see people really squeeze past cyclists when they really shouldn't. They turn across cyclist path, they don't see them. So I think it's educating motorists is one of the key issues.
And Toby, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is all part of the wider sustainability agenda, really. And we in terms of carbon reduction, this is something that everybody really needs to be thinking about. And it's not until you start actually calculating what your carbon footprint is that people actually really understand what the impact is. And by understanding what your carbon footprint is, then allows you to start thinking, well, what could you do as an individual to try and reduce that. Typically, travel, long distance travel is the thing that really pushes up that carbon footprint. And so if you look at the number of miles that you drive if you're driving a conventional vehicle, then that will be quite a considerable hit on your footprint. Flying long distance for lovely holidays in far off countries that will be probably the largest. If you do long haul flights will be the worst thing for your carbon footprint. So actually encouraging people to think about thinking about holidays that are just closer to home. So I'm currently on a staycation at Hendra campsite in Newquay. That was the bingo. Somebody's just won bingo, I think, out the back there. But you can still have a great holiday and actually not have to add on a huge impact. And so people need to be looking at their carbon footprint across all parts of their life, their work and travel, their holidays, and that will actually drive change if people start measuring it.
And Jeff, do you want to jump in?
Yes, thank you. It's Jeff Brown, Cabinet Member for Transport. I think you're all correct in that we need to reduce the impact on our carbon footprint, and cycling is one of the ways that we can do that. That's why we're investing £19 million into the Saints Trails in mid-Cornwall. That money, a lot of it came through Highways England as part of the dualling of the A30. But I take on the point that we also need to connect those routes into the town so that it picks up on safe cycle routes through the key towns in Cornwall as well. But cycling isn't the only answer. I have to say, I never thought I'd see the day when Andrew Mitchell would be on a bike, but he's proved me wrong. But I still don't think he'll ever commute from St Ives to County Hall for a meeting on his bike. So we've got to look at a modal shift out of the car, which is why we've also been working really hard on an integrated public transport system. Set back slightly by the Prime Minister's announcement not very long ago that we should avoid public transport. Hopefully those messages will be changing soon because we're working really hard to get an integrated transport system with a new bus contract, the new buses, the rail timetables, so they all link together. And we should have a really effective public transport system, which we're going to incentivise people to use from the 1st of January with a much reduced fares pilot for the next 4 years. So there is another option there, as well as cycling, to get people out of cars, using other forms of transport to reduce pollution.
Can I just say, Jeff, thanks for that. And I thought I'd never see Andrew Mitchell on a bike either.
And Richard, did you want to go next?
Yeah, one thing maybe come to the meeting with, if we had a tax break as employees, so for less carbon or losing weight, you had a free bike, that incentive becomes quite big. So imagine if you lost half a stone and the £2,000 electric bike is now only suddenly £1,000 and you lose another half a stone and it's free, it really does change people's mindsets. Or it can be done with carbon, or it can be done with meeting a group, or social welfare, or mental well-being. Tax breaks, actually giving something tactile to somebody rather than reducing costs necessarily on transport, really does work. So that's another thing to take away from this meeting, along with your red paint.
And lastly, Matthew, can we go to you, please?
Yeah, it was just one last point, just echoing what Jeff was saying. I mean, we've got a very good bus infrastructure network within the county. One bold idea would be to have bike racks on buses, just to be able to, because obviously the trains are very difficult and it is just that core spine down through Cornwall. But if we had buses that had bike racks on them, it would open up such a huge area for a lot of rural cyclists, and vice versa. It would bring people in to the towns and cities, and would maybe encourage, even if they do it one way, and go back on the bus with their shopping. It's a really great idea, and if Cornwall embraced that, it could be something that would be very innovative for the county.
It's already been discussed with Transport for Cornwall, Matthew. It's already on their agenda.
Well, let's hope that it comes to fruition.
Yeah, hope so.
Wonderful. Well, thanks everybody. That's just about all we've got time for this evening. So just want to say a big thank you to the panel and remind people that they can carry on the conversation on the Cornwall We Want website, and the link to that is in the Facebook comments. So just going to hand back to Councillor Jeff Brown now, please. You say a few words and close the event.
I just wanted to thank everyone who's joined the debate this evening on Facebook, and all of our panelists for giving up their valuable time and making some really valuable contributions. The aim of the event is to listen, and having listened, we now need to reflect on some of the wide-ranging ideas that have come forward and turn ideas into reality. I wish you all well, take care and stay safe.
Thank you.